Hello everybody, this is Dino GTO, and this is going to be a video mainly just focusing on the new changes to patch 9.18. Now, some pretty significant changes in this patch. Probably the most important one for most people is the change to the light tanks. Like if we look at the Russians as an example, they've been pretty much totally reworked. No, like if you look at the MT25 as an example, this thing on the live server I believe gets a 700 horsepower engine. It's got even more power in the engine on the test server, and it now has the option of a 76. I don't believe it had that before, so that's new. And then there's this new thing here, the LTG, which is at tier 7 to replace the LTTB, which seems like a pretty decent tank overall, but it's not going to win any beauty contest. Like I've heard people say some tanks are ugly, but this looks like they cut the top off an Object 704 and then dropped like a KB5 on top of it. I mean, what the fuck happened with this thing? Like it looks so fucking bad. It looks so weird. Like it looks like they made a mistake while drawing it, and somebody like pulled the piece of paper out from under them whenever they were drawing the turret, and it went. But yeah, it's not a pretty tank, but it looks like it'll probably be a pretty solid tank overall. I mean, this is one of the main changes actually. Now that I think of it, of this patch. They're basically unifying the kind of penetration and all you get in a tier 7 light tank. So 144. A lot of people look at that, they're comparing to I think shit like the M41 in this patch in 9.17.1. Don't do that. That's a terrible idea because they are totally different. These tier 7 light tanks will never meet a tier 10 ever. Like the way they're set up, these things can meet tier 5s and they can meet up to tier 9s. That's the way their matchmaking works. They will never meet a tier 10 again, and that is awesome in my opinion. They have around 880 health, so roughly about the same as they had previously. So I would say overall that it actually makes them more durable than they were before, because if you think about it, there's less huge ass guns shooting at them if you think about it, because I mean there's shit like the E100s and the giant ass tank destroyer guns at tier 10. So because they meet maximum tier 9s now, I would say they actually have more survivability than they had before, because there are less 750 alpha monster guns at tier 9 than there are at tier 10. So let's just quickly max this thing out and see. But yeah, the main thing I've seen for the Russians is they all have mental power to weight ratios, pretty crappy gun depression if I'm totally honest. But overall, they're pretty solid machines. They're pretty much all relatively small and extremely quick because, well, LTTB is famous for its incredible engine bar. This thing got actually a buff of 70 horsepower to its engine, so this thing is going to be mental speed-wise. But bear in mind, this thing is now a tier 8 light tank, and the T-54 lightweight went to tier 9. So most of the tier 8 light tanks were moved to tier 9, with the exception of the WZ-132. And a crucial thing to point out here, if you own a tier 8 light tank right now, you will get, like according to this test server and what happened on the test server, you will get the tier 9 light tank for free. Like I own the T49 on the live server. Whenever I logged on the test server, I got the T49 and the M41. Same with the 1390, I got the Batchat 12T and the 1390. And same with the T54 lightweight, I got the LTTP and the T54 lightweight. So it looks like buying these light tanks, with the exception of the WZ-132 on the live server, is actually a good idea before this patch comes out. I would recommend trying to do that because, well, if saving 3 million credits, probably not a bad idea. Because, well, if you think about it, it's 1 million credits more to buy them at tier 9, and then you're getting a free tier 8 as well. So yeah, it's about 3 million credits you're saving. So yeah, I would recommend doing that. And honestly, I'm going to grind out the credits like crazy to get the RE251 again because, well, I don't have one of those right now on the live server, so I need to work on that. But let's go back to the Russians here and just kind of show you what else has changed. The gun is pretty much identical to what it was at tier 7, except now it has 5 degrees of gun depression, which is a huge buff for this thing, considering before it had 3. Now, actually, thinking about it, the main thing for the Russians is horrific accuracy With the exception of the LTTB, the LTTB I think is the only one to have really kind of decent accuracy. Like 0.36 is pretty good, but all the others have pretty shocking accuracy. I mean, look at the accuracy on this thing, 0.42, and the tier 10 it gets 0.44. So yeah, it's shocking accuracy, but they have some armor. I mean, the LTTB has some armor, T54 Lightweight has some armor, and the tier 10 also has some armor. So they have some armor, kind of mediocre in terms of actual accuracy and all, but for the most part, they're actually decent guns, except for the ability to shoot range. They're not very good at that. They're built to be brawlers, in my opinion. They have incredible part of weight ratios, and honestly, that's probably the main change you're going to notice with the T54 Lightweight. On the live server, this thing currently gets a 700 horsepower engine. Stock, this thing gets an 800 horsepower engine. So you can imagine what the upgraded one's going to have. Take a guess, take a shot in the dark. It has a 1000 horsepower engine. This thing basically has the engine of an IS-7 in something that weighs how much? 30 tons. Yeah, that's fucking crazy. And this thing accelerates like a go-kart on crack. It's so goddamn quick, and it also got a significant buff to its penetration because it went up to tier 9. It went from 175, I believe it was, to 208. So that's a pretty decent buff. This thing is going to be a devastating tank in my opinion, in terms of like just being able to get close to an enemy vehicle and just circle straight for to death. This thing's going to be really, really good at that. So yeah, let's see. Let's look at the tier 10 because tier 10 is probably the main thing they're going to be interested in. Now, I was actually able to sign into the test server yesterday, but the problem I had was I couldn't actually use free XP, so I couldn't actually look at any of the tier 10 vehicles other than the stat window. And I wasn't actually able to either. I wasn't able to actually like free XP some of the artillery so I could play them. Because that's another big change of this patch. The artillery's got reworked, but let's focus on the light tanks for now. The main characteristic of this thing here is it has some armor. Okay-ish armor for a light tank. I mean, light tanks you don't expect to have too much armor. Mental top speed, but probably the most mental part of weight ratio I have ever seen. 48. The last thing I can remember having a part of weight ratio like that was the T50 at tier 4. Back when that thing had like a 550 horsepower engine. That's absolutely crazy. A 48 part of weight ratio. This thing is going to be like I don't even know how to describe this thing. It's gonna be like a fucking Veyron. Let's see. Also has a really good pen. Russian medium, pretty much gun. It's probably going to, like, the main things I've noticed here about these vehicles is the mediums tend to have better rates of fire and overall gun handling, but the lights are significantly faster, but sacrifice some of the general armor characteristics of the mediums. So it's kind of interesting. Like probably the most interesting one is the Germans. Like SP1C remains a tier 7. It has a 158 pen gun now. So 159 is actually the highest at tier 7 as far as I can recall. From the Chinese WZ131, which I believe gets a 159. So the penetration has basically been standardized across tier 7, which I think is a really good thing because if you think about it, shit like the T71 in comparison to the 1375. The 1375 had 144 pen, and meanwhile the T71 had 175. That was pretty bullshit. So the fact that they've pretty much standardized the penetration amount, give or take 15 millimeters, is pretty good. It's pretty good in my opinion. Like 1375 has 144 pen, which seems pretty solid in my opinion for a tier 7 light. Now that they've been reworked. Also, something I should just mention in general, lights in general got a significant buff to their engine power. Like this thing here has a 400 horsepower engine. The 1375 has a 400 horsepower engine. The 12T gets a 330 horsepower engine, so all of them got some buffs to their engine power. 1390 now has a 470 horsepower engine instead of, I believe it was 360 or something like that there beforehand. So all of them now have a significantly better power to weight ratio than they had previously. So that's, in my opinion, a pretty good change because it's going to be allow them to be a bit more maneuverable and maintain their top speed a bit better, and just in general be able to get around the map more consistently and at a good speed. So let's see, what's top speed on this thing? 68. So yeah, the 13105 is going to be a pretty Uh, Decently quick machine. But one big thing I should mention quickly about the French autoloaders, they now lose a shot in their magazine. Or no, they lose 2 shots in their magazine. Previously, they had 6 shots per drum. That was pretty, like, it was a pretty good amount of shots. But the problem with the 6 shots per drum was the ammo capacity for the vehicles. And honestly, I think this is a bug. The 1375 has 42 rounds of ammo. It's a 4-shot autoloader, so you physically can't have 40. You physically can't have um, all of the clips full with ammo, if that makes sense. Like, let's say you have 12 here, but there's only 10 being bought, so that seems like a bug to me. That seems like something they'll probably fix. I would say this thing probably should have like 48 rounds of ammo, but yeah. The way it works, it's like hang on, let me just try upgrading the. God damn it, I have to. I'll upgrade the gun, see if the ammo capacity changes. Oh no, it's down to 36. Okay. Let's see. So the main change I have noticed for these vehicles is most of them got a bit more in terms of shell capacity. Like, I believe the 12T previous to this patch, I think had like 24 rounds. Now it gets 36. The 1375 remains with 36. Unfortunately, I would like the 1375 to actually get a couple more rounds of ammo, maybe 48 rounds, because the 1375, even though it's going to be only be making tier 9's maximum, it's still so easy to run out of ammo in these things. Like, going through that amount of shots is not a difficult thing. It's actually pretty easy to go through that amount of shots. But yeah, let's see. So the main thing with the tier 8 light tanks is that they seem to have roughly the same HP pools as the tier 8 tank destroyers for the most part, except for things like the Ferdinand, for obvious reasons. They mainly have about a thousand health, which I think is a pretty solid chunk of health, considering previously tier 8 light tanks, whenever whenever the lowest tier they could meet was like tier 8, I think. Like, they physically couldn't meet a certain tier. I can't remember what it was. I think that it was either that they could not meet tier 8s, or they could not meet tier 7s or something like that, or they definitely could not meet tier 6s. I don't think they could meet tier 6s or tier 7s very often either. I think it was mainly tier 8, 9, and 10 was their matchmaking, so they were basically balanced as tier 9s, but they were placed at tier 8. So it makes a lot more sense for them to be at tier 9 now. So the main trait of the French autoloading light tanks is that they now have 4 shots per mag instead of 6, but they actually got a bit of an enhanced ammo capacity. Like previously, the 1390 had 36, I believe. Now it has 44, which is a pretty decent buff. Just going to take a look. Where's the batch at 12T? There it is. This thing here carries 52 rounds, which is pretty sweet. This thing's full upgrade. Yep, it is. So they're getting a lot more ammo than they used to, which is a really good buff in my opinion, because if you've driven the French all-loading light tanks, you know how easy it is to run out of ammo. And now we're getting on to the only exception to the rule in terms of the ammo capacity, the 13105. The 13105, it has a 3-shot all-loader instead of a 4-shot all-loader. And I'm just going to quickly take a look and see what ammo capacity this thing actually has. This is kind of an important factor. It has 33 rounds. For a 105 gun, that's actually pretty good, actually. I expect it to be worse than that. I would probably carry, let's see, I would probably carry 24, 6, 3. I feel like that's what I would do, because this thing actually doesn't have too bad of a reload time for a 105 3-shot all-loader. I mean, it's 27 seconds, but that's without any kind of cruise skills or anything like that there, so that's probably going to get significantly lower than it currently is. So I feel like this thing's going to be a pretty interesting vehicle. I mean, it's going to one clip pretty much every tier. It's going to one clip every tier 8 light tank guaranteed, and some tier 9 light tanks as well if you get lucky with your rolls. So this thing's gun is going to be devastating. So I'm looking forward to the French. I feel like the French are going to be really, really cool next patch. Let's see, the Germans are probably the most interesting one. They've remained the same tier 4, 5, 6, and 7. Except I think maybe they got some like gun changes. Oh yeah, the 75mm on this thing has more pen than it used to, which is a good change because previously 110 pen was garbage. Don't know why it didn't have more. Let's let's see, this thing here gets about 145 and then it goes up to 158. So yeah, SP1C, it lost its autoloader, but I think this gun is going to be pretty competitive at tier 7, considering it will never meet at tier 10. And that's something people are probably forgetting about pretty often when they're looking at these vehicles. They aren't taking into account these things the tier 7s in particular will never meet tier 10s again. Tier 6s will never meet tier 9s again. Tier 5s will never meet tier 8s again. So you need to take that into consideration when you're looking at the stats for these vehicles. And if you take that into consideration, it actually makes a lot of sense why they're balanced the way they are. Like this thing here is actually, I think, one of the more interesting ones. I mean, it looks kind of ridiculous in my opinion, but like for some reason it kind of makes me think of like one of the turrets on like the Death Star, but I don't know. Let's see. Let's just quickly check all the upgrades onto it. Now, the Germans' main thing seems to be their ability to use their guns range, and we say I probably picked the one that no, it's good. Aim and stats and all. So yeah. The German thing is above tier 7 and up. They have no armor whatsoever. They're basically giant cardboard boxes. They have no armor. They're blisteringly quick, and their guns are good at range. That's their main thing. Like as far as I can tell, they're built for longer range combat. They're not built to brawl. They can probably do it and use their health to do it near the end of the game. But for the most part, I would say these things are built to stay at longer ranges and avoid close range combat, because these things will get dominated in close range combat because they have no armor to speak of whatsoever. I mean, look at these armor values. I mean, HE from like a 75mm gun would go through that with ease, even when angled. So, yeah, these things are not built to brawl if you can avoid it. But something I keep forgetting to mention is the penetration buffs that the tier 9s, or well, the tier 8s, or what were previous tier 8s but are now tier 9s, got in the latest patch. I'm just going to quickly max this thing out. And yeah, you did just read that right. This thing has a 900 horsepower engine now. Considering on the live server it has like a 640 horsepower engine, yeah, that part of weight ratio is fucking incredible. 35, it's kind of put to shame by the tier 10 Russian, but tier 10 Russian's just ridiculous. It has ridiculous view range as well. So yeah, these things here are mainly built, in my opinion, for a longer range, ranged playstyle. Let's look at the Panzerwagen. Panzerwagen gets a 105mm gun, 240 pen. Pretty good stats for a longer range used gun. Really good part of weight ratio. 1100 horsepower engine. Holy crap! It doesn't weigh much as far as I remember, so would not recommend ramming in this thing. Probably will just end up getting yourself killed. Let's actually just look what is the weight on this thing. I have no idea. It's probably 25-ton tank. Yeah, don't ram in this thing. Not a good idea. The Russians, I would say, are probably built best for kind of ramming stuff. Like, the Russians have the frontal armor, and they have overall pretty decently heavy tanks. Like, they have also got, well, for the exception of the tier 10. Tier 10 does not have much weight, but the T-54 lightweight, the LTTB, those are all pretty decently heavy tanks, and they have frontal armor, so you could actually get away with ramming other light tanks in those. I wouldn't recommend it in the tier 10 because it's only 15 tons in weight, but still it has some pretty solid armor value, so it could maybe do it if you're in a squeeze, but I wouldn't recommend it. Let's just look at the Americans next. The Americans, they have an interesting lineup. The M7, I'm not sure if they did this a while ago or not, but this thing is now a light tank, and that removes the awkward as fuck stage from the game where you had to go from a light tank to a medium tank to a light tank, which always really pissed me off. I don't know why the hell they decided to do that there, but because this thing is a light tank now, that makes the grind a bit easier. And something I should just mention here quickly is the Chaffee and the T-37. These things here have guns which are built for closer range combat because they have absolutely no accuracy stats whatsoever. The T-21 is built for longer range combat because the accuracy stat is actually okay. Same with the aiming time. Like these things here are pretty good at close range or long range, and these things here are built for close range because, well, look at the accuracy at 0.45. These are derp gun accuracies. So yeah, that's pretty shocking. So you want to keep these things at range and just fire like a machine gun. Um, T71, it got massively reduced penetration, and it makes perfect sense because it no longer meets tier 10s, as I keep mentioning, because I feel like I have to hammer that home, because some people are going to be looking at these and going, oh, why would I play this? Well, these are awful, we want to changes. I know for a fact people are going to be doing that there, and it's a mistake to do that there and judge them based on their previous characteristics in comparison to the post characteristics, because they are totally different vehicles for the most part. Let's just look what engine part does this thing have. 420 horsepower, yeah, it's going to have a decent power to weight ratio. M41, it has a pretty good power to weight ratio as well, 34.05, so it's pretty sick in terms of mobility. Same with the T49. T49 also got a buff in engine power, 36 power to weight ratio. Then we come to the Sheridan. The Sheridan's an interesting case because, well, I can actually unlock it now and show you what it will be like. The Sheridan, it has two gun options, a 105mm lightweight gun and a XM81 conventional rocket launcher. Well, not a rocket launcher, 152mm drop gun. In real life, I believe it was a rocket launcher on the main production version, but on this thing here, which is a prototype, it's a standard gun. So let's just look. Let's just look at the power to weight ratio. I'm not sure if it gets worse or better with this gun. It gets better. Okay, cool. So that's a pretty good thing to note. Honestly, I think this is probably going to be one of the more interesting vehicles. I believe the back part of the tank is actually spaced armor, and this thing here is probably spaced armor, if I had to guess. So this thing is probably going to be pretty good versus people firing HE at it. It's a pretty big target, though. That's the one thing I do have to say, but that's kind of a trait of the Americans. I mean, the T-49 is not a small tank. T-49 is a pretty big tank. People just don't realize how big it is. Like, if you look at a comparison to T-54 lightweight, it's about like the T-49 is about here. This thing here is about here. So yeah, it's a pretty tall machine, which means its camo value is actually a bit worse than you would expect. It also gets a lot of health, so that seems to be probably the main balancing factor of the American lights. I expect them to probably have the highest health points in general, because they're pretty damn big tanks. So let's see. That thing has 1600. What does this thing have? I think it was like 15. I think the Russian had 1500 as well. This thing here has 1600. So this thing and the American have the same health. What's the 1305 have? It has 1400, so it has the lowest health so far. What does the WZ have? WZ has 1500. Okay, so the Russian and the Chinese have the same health. The American and the German have the same health, and the French has the lowest health. Which kind of makes sense. Kind of goes with the trend of like the kind of vehicles. But yeah, now we're on to the last line. I've covered the French, covered the Americans, covered the Germans, and covered the Soviets. So the Chinese are the last line. Now, the first thing they did was they streamlined the grind for the 916. They removed the awful 76mm autoloader and replaced it with a higher penetration 76mm standard gun, which is, in my opinion, a pretty good change because it actually has a usable 76 now. You don't have to just use the 57 the entire round like I did. So it's a good change in my opinion, and I think this thing could actually be a decent little tank. Remember, we'll make maximum tier 8s now instead of tier 9s. So let's see, WZ132 or WZ131. This thing here got streamlined grind as well. As far as I remember, this thing used to have like 4 guns it could go through. They had like a 76, then an 85, then another 85, and then another 85, and then 100. So this thing here had so many guns to go through. So I'm glad they streamlined the grind on this thing here as well, because that was such a ball ache. I'm not gonna lie. Like just trying to remember like which gun is it I should go for on this thing next. Like so yeah, that's a pretty good change in my opinion. So let's see here. Where's the start getting? Yeah, the 132 seems to be pretty much identical to the way it was, except it sacrifices some accuracy over what it used to be. The accuracy on this thing here on the live server, I believe it's like 0.34 or something like that there. But it can make sense if you think about it, because this thing here is a tier 8 light tank. It is going to get standard matchmaking for tier 8 light tank, which means it will be able to meet tier 6s. So it makes sense that they reduce some of the accuracy stats on it, because can you imagine like if this thing remained exactly the way it was on the live server when it was changed to this here version, this thing would be fucking devastating. And it would just annihilate everything. So let's just see here. Actually, out of curiosity, I have to just put a couple of upgrades on this thing. Does it increase the health points if I do this? It does, okay, so. Right, so let's see. Let's look at the WZ132A. This thing gets a 320 Alpha 100mm gun. So it seems like the Tier 9. Actually, let me think about this here. Is it right to say that? I'm tempted to say that the Chinese main thing is the highest alpha guns. Well, highest alpha non-derp guns, although at Tier 10 that kind of gets overridden. Because if you think about it, the Tier 10, the Sheridan kind of nukes the... Or no, never mind. The Tier 10 lights, for the most part, have like 105 guns. Like the 1390 has a 105, or 1315 has a 105, obviously. Sheridan has a 105 option. The German has a 105, and so does the WZ. The WZ1321 also uses a 105. I would say it's a pretty decent gun. 2-second aiming time, 0.42 accuracy. Accuracy is terrible, but the aiming time is really, really good. I would say this thing's built to be more of a brawler as well. It's kind of like the opposite to the Americans. The Americans are versatile in every way except they're massive. This thing is versatile in every way except the gun depression is kind of bad. So I think it's an interesting way to do it, and it does have 5 degrees of gun depression, not 3, so that's awesome. And also I think it's one of the cooler looking models. I mean, I like the side skirts, and I like this like little cage around the turret. I think that looks awesome. Plus I think a 105 in a WZ hull looks awesome as well. And let's just see, here is the WZ132A, and let's just look through the upgrades for it. This thing gets a 770 horsepower engine, does not have an upgradable turret, and gets a really long 100mm. So pretty good aiming time, 0.4 accuracy, 770 horsepower engine. Yeah, it seems like it's going to be a pretty solid tank. Pretty good DPM as well. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to see how these light tanks fare on the live server. Trying to play them on the test server is kind of iffy because, well, people aren't exactly playing them seriously right now, and it's difficult to get a lot of spot damage on the test server because everybody just drives like kind of an idiot on the test server. So yeah, but yeah, the next main change I need to mention is the artillery changes. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the Tier 10 light tanks. Tier 10 light tanks are going to be epic. But first thing I just want to do before that, or before I finish off this video, is just kind of take a quick look at the artillery changes. Now, S51 is a pretty good one to look at because you get to see a couple of different things. First off, you get to see the stun mechanic in the information panels. Let's see. So it has the S51 has 2 gun options: the 152 and the 203. The 203 is basically a cruiser gun, but you can see the difference between the rate of fire. You can see the difference between the pen, and you can see the difference between the alpha. On the live server, people just go for the 203 because 203 is the bigger gun, and it makes sense because the 152 struggles to do damage on the live server. But the way this has been changed, now I would say it's more of a question as to which one you want to pick, because the 152 has a 2.4 rounds per minute, and the 203 has a 1.15 rounds per minute rate of fire. So the 152 fires over twice as fast. It has more accuracy and it's faster aiming time as well. The only way it's like the ways it's worse are the damage and penetration, but the stunning ability is pretty close for the most part. I mean, the minimum stun is only 1.3 worse. Sure, the maximum stun is 5 seconds worse, but I think with the extra rate of fire, I think the 152 may actually be the way to go on the S51. So the stunning mechanic is a pretty interesting mechanic, and I honestly like that mechanic a lot more than the current model of artillery, which is just, oh yeah, you're suddenly dead because artillery decided fuck you. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see how this fares on the live server as well, and I really want to test this out. I will test this out soon. I'll probably try and get some gameplay up afterwards. But let's just see. Just going to quickly train up a crew on this thing. I am probably going to leave this video here for the most part because this is the most I feel like I should cover. I've covered the main changes to the vehicles and how like the different lines have different flavors now. Like the French line is officially like the main auto-loading line. The Russians are mainly designed to be brawlers in my opinion. The Chinese are kind of a middle ground between the Russians and the Germans in my opinion. The Germans are mainly built to be long range stuff, are mainly built to be used long range, and the Americans are built to be more versatile but have a huge size, so they're easier to hit for the most part. So I think this is good. This is going to be really interesting, and I'm really hoping these changes make it through to the live server. So yeah, and yeah, it's also nice that the test server seems to have confirmed that if you own the tier 8 light tanks, then you're going to get the tier 9s for free. So I don't know if Wargaming has confirmed that, but from what I've seen on the test server, it seems that it might actually be true. So I'm hoping that is true. So I'm going to grind out the credits now on the live server. Once I've done like doing my main like overview of the test server, I'm probably going to start going to the live server and try and grind the credits for the RU251 because I would like to save the money personally. So yeah. That's the main changes to the test server. I very briefly went over the artillery mechanics. I'll probably do a more in-depth video on each of the new light tanks and the artillery mechanics. Artillery mechanics probably first because I'm really intrigued by them. So yeah. Let me know, what do you think of these main changes? Have you been on the test server yet? I know there's a long queue. I actually managed to do a full gameplay of a different game before I even got into this test server. So yeah. Let me know what you think of these changes. Do you think they're good? Do you think they're bad? Or you just kind of neutral and you don't really care as long as the artillery gets changed. I know a lot of people are going to still say, just remove artillery from the game, fuck them with stun mechanics. But I think the stun mechanics could actually work. And I've played a couple of games in the MX, the tier 6 MX artillery. And the MX artillery is actually pretty fun to play. Well, it's actually not too bad to play, although it is kind of difficult to get a lot of stunning assistance damage on the test server because people don't work as a team, they just work on their own, just mainly try out the tanks. So people aren't really going for wins, people are just running around like headless chickens. So you can't really expect to be getting a lot of assistance damage on the server right now, but I believe on the live server these would actually translate pretty well to like doing pretty well in general games. So yeah, and I'll do a more in-depth explanation of the stunning mechanic in its own separate video, so yeah. So, as I said earlier, let me know what you think of these mechanic changes and the tier 10 light tanks and such and things like that. And, well, yeah. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.